Santa Claus, or Saint Nick, has been around for hundreds of years and has some pretty established lore. So much in fact that you could pretty easily convert him into a character in Baldur's Gate 3. So, let's do just that. Getting started as always in the character creator, and for the race we have two options. It's generally debated that he's either a human with an army of elven workers or a larger elf himself. However, in game elves can have facial hair, and in the interest of him having some of his most iconic features, I'm going to go with human. This means standard movement range with some basic weapon proficiencies, an extra skill proficiency, and most importantly, some extra carry weight for all those presents. Now for the iconic Santa Claus look. Do I even really have to explain this? He's a warm old grandpa with a kind face, rosy cheeks, a twinkle in his eye, a long white beard, and matching hair. Now, while he's most widely seen to be Tim Allen, he doesn't actually have a set form and instead changes for everyone looking at him, taking on their own race or features, but always keeping the white hair and beard. That said, I'm from Ohio though, white boy, so we're sticking with Tim Allen. As for his class, this is where I had the most trouble since Santa is really a magician at heart and a protector of good rather than an offensive fighter. Of course, he's going to have to take part in some kind of battling over the course of the game, but if we want to focus on pure support and basically no combat, there is but one class that fits the bill. Yes, we're making old Saint Nick into a bard, and I really feel this is the perfect class. Later on we can pick up tons of support spells and abilities and can go almost the entire game without using an attack if we really wanted to. He'll start out with Bardic Inspiration, allowing him to inspire an ally with a +1 d6 to their next attack, ability or saving throw roll, essentially just making them better at whatever they're doing. This is also a bonus action, so it can be used alongside spells or anything else he wants to do during a turn, so works great for maximum support. He starts out with 2 cantrips, and I'm going with Friends for a bit of added charisma, and Blade Ward for some added protection. We can also grab 4 level 1 spells. I'm going Healing Word for some single target ranged heals, Cure Wounds for some increased melee healing, Heroism for some added support for allies, and Fairy Fire to light up battles and aid allies in combat. As for his instruments, apparently some cultures around the world always have Santa playing some form of brass instrument, and the closest we can get here is the flute, so we're going to go with that. Believe me, if I could get him a saxophone, I would, but them's the breaks, as some asshole once said. As for his background, whilst artisan might make a lot of sense, or even folk hero, the description of entertainer is simply perfect. Santa exists to bring joy to everyone from the most rich and powerful to the poorest of the poor. Plus, entertainer fits really well with the whole bardic charisma deal, so it's some great synergy. Finally, for his abilities, we're seeing a ton of charisma, since that's how we want to solve all of our problems if possible, and helps with all our bardic spellcasting. Strength is basically non-existent, since that's only really useful for melee combat, which we have no interest in. Yeah, I know that Santa is really a bit of a Gary Stu and is really super strong because he can carry all those presents, but something's got to give in this build, and strength is the least important. Dexterity, however, is pretty decent at 14, since he can climb up and down chimneys, no problem. Also, comes in useful for keeping him safe in combat with better evasion, so that's just great. Constitution is just above average, which is fine since he's got to have a pretty tough constitution to eat all those cookies and milk without a toilet on the sleigh. Intelligence and wisdom also at 12 since he's pretty smart and perceptive, the latter of which will only get better as this build comes online. Lastly, we close out with his skills. We get to pick quite a few here, so I'm going with animal handling for all those reindeer, insights and perception since nothing gets past this guy, no matter if you're naughty or nice, and persuasion since how can you say no to this charmer. And with that, we're ready to get into his gear and playstyle. Gear first because it's painfully straightforward. We have no interest in real combat, but in the interest of making him not totally worthless if he can't cast, we'll give him a hammer and a shield. The shield will be there to keep him safe and make him a little tankier, since, as you'll see in a moment, he needs all help he can get in that department. And the hammer, because of all the melee weapons available, this is the one he has any experience with as a great inventor and toy builder. Again, focus on avoiding dealing direct damage since that kind of ruins his image a little bit, but if the world depends on it, then treat those enemies like a nail and get hammering. And for ranged, I gave him a dart. He doesn't, none of them make sense, so the dart seemed like the one that made the most sense of the things that make no sense, so just pick whatever you want. As for armor, we can't make much use of anything above light armor, so he's never going to be all that tough, hence the shield. I leaned all the way into this and clothed him in red robes with black boots and gloves, and the closest approximation I could find to a Santa hat. The real focus here is the red clothing, so if you can at least find some dye, you should be all set for this jolly fella. Bonus points for anything that enhances his support spells, but as always, style over everything. Now for his playstyle. If you've somehow managed to avoid the guy for the last few hundred years, in his most common form, Santa is a benevolent gift giver whose sole purpose is to bring joy and cheer to everyone around the world. Now he's landed in Faerun. Why should things be any different? You want to use this charm to win over everyone you can and fulfill as many dreams and wishes as you can without hurting anyone you don't have to. Santa doesn't really want to hurt anyone, so avoid unnecessary conflict where possible, and if combat is unavoidable, focus on support rather than attacking to aid your team to victory with as little direct involvement as possible. As more spell slots open up, this will become a lot easier and you'll be able to keep him at the back, ensuring allies stay healthy and confident at the task at hand. Speaking of allies, you can go with pretty much anyone. Santa welcomes people from all walks of life, so whether you want to warm the heart of a creature of the night or introduce a goth girl to the joys of, well, joy, you can do just that and it all makes perfect sense. Lastly, if there's a chance to brighten the day of some young ones, make the most of it and spread joy even if the world is struggling to find any. Whip out that flute and perform wherever you can to bring people together and help them see light in a world full of darkness. And with that, we can finally get into how to level up this guy. Starting us off at level 2, he gains 1 spell slot and can learn a new spell. I went with Charm Person to aid in the most difficult conversations where you really need to go all out to convince someone. We also pick up Jack of all trades. This allows him to gain half of his proficiency bonus on ability checks you are not proficient in, essentially making him better at everything, which actually makes a lot of sense. And finally, Song of Rest. This is functionally an extra short rest to revitalize your party, so what's not to love? Level 3, we can grab some more skill proficiencies. I'm going to go with History, Investigation, and Nature. Investigation is more of his expert perception to determine who's getting gifts this year, and History and Nature are more his great knowledge of the world since he's been around for so long and interacts with many of its creatures. We also gain a level 2 spell slot and another spell. I'm choosing Lesser Restoration for more support for allies afflicted with a range of status effects. Lastly, we can choose his Bardic subclass, and if you ask me, the College of Law is the way to go based on description alone. We're looking for beauty and truth throughout the world and seek to share this with everyone we meet. The cutting wit we gain in combat is a welcome bonus to reduce enemy power and keep allies even safer. At level 4, we can pick up another cantrip, and I'm taking Dancing Lights because Seen in the Dark is super useful and helps light up the place even if you don't have a torch handy. He also gains another level 2 spell slot and an extra spell, and I went with Enhance Ability so he can empower his allies both in and out of combat. Lastly, we can pick up our first feat, and I'm going for Ritual Caster and picking up Talk to Animals and Find Familiar. Santa can speak to all creatures and is beloved by many, so these two together let him do both of these things, no problem. Level 5 brings an upgrade for Bardic Inspiration, with it now providing a D8 bonus instead of a D6. As well as this, he regains all charges after either a long or short rest, so can be inspirational much more often. We also pick up our first level 3 spell slot and a spell to go with it, and I went with Feign Death. A little niche, but if you really need to keep an ally safe from damage, it can come in useful. At level 6, we pick up Counter Charm, which gives nearby allies an advantage on saving throws against charms and fears. Bit more support, and it doesn't even cost a spell slot. Speaking of which, we can get another one at level 3 and can grab another spell. I went with Detect Force for some more utility outside of combat, and it fits pretty well with Santa knowing what everyone is up to at all times. Which isn't weird if you think about it for more than like 1 second. He can also grab 2 extra spells from his knowledge of the magical secrets, and I went with Warden of Vitality and Mass Healing for a crapload of support. Level 7 we get our first level 4 spell slot and a spell to go with it. I went with Freedom of Movement to keep that support and keep allies mobile in combat, which is an underrated skill to have. Level 8 it's pretty much the same, another spell slot and another spell, this time it's Hypnotic Pattern. Finally some sort of offense, and it's pretty much just aiming to immobilize enemies. For his next feat, I'm going with Mobile to keep him on the move and out of enemy reach, to keep him healthy and more importantly, able to maintain spell concentration a lot easier. At level 9 we get our first level 5 spell slot and pick up the Mass Cure Wound spell. What's this there to say? It's a bunch of healing, what's not to love? Level 10 we can pick up a couple extra skills, and I went with Perception and Insight to ensure that nothing gets past this guy in pretty much any situation. We can also grab another cantrip, and I went with Mage Hand for some utility in combat without direct offense. We gain our first level 5 spell slot and a spell. I went for Greater Restoration so we can now cure some even more devastating status effects, and we can unlock 2 more magical effects. I went with Death Ward and Haste. Death Ward allows us to save allies from certain doom at 1 HP, giving us a chance to heal them back up and stay safe in battles. And Haste grants us or allies enhanced movement on their turn, as well as dodge chance for greater offensive and defensive capabilities. At level 11 we pick up our first level 6 spell slot and a spell to go with it. I went for his only actually offensive spell, Otto's Irresistible Dance, essentially preventing a target from acting for the duration and gives allies advantage on attack rolls against them. Finally, at level 12, we can choose one final spell. I went with Planar Binding, which allows us to turn certain otherworldly creatures to our side, gaining allies in battle to turn the odds into our favour. Finally, we can pick one last feat, and I went with Warcaster, mainly for the advantage on concentration saving throws, to ensure our spells are as uninterruptible as possible. In his final form, Old Saint Nick should be slinging support spells like nobody's business and be able to keep his allies alive and at peak performance through the toughest of encounters no problem. He'll be an expert conversationalist and hyper aware of his surroundings to the point that not much can sneak up on him. With him in the party, you'll have no problem spreading joy, hope and cheer around all of Faerun while sending any evildoers packing, lump of coal in hand. And that just about wraps things up for this Santa Claus build in Baldur's Gate 3. If you celebrate it, I hope you're having a wonderful Christmas day, and if not, then have a great Monday all the same. If you're wishing for more Baldur's Gate 3 this Christmas, then maybe check out this video here featuring our king they ever chosen.